Hey there, everyone. Welcome to TRG 30 on Wednesday, the 13th of October. Caitlin is here with me today. Hi, Caitlin. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, good. So nice to see you. And welcome, everyone. So nice to have you all here.
Yes, thank you for being with us again. Caitlin, I saw my first pumpkin patch in the UK today. I didn't know that we had them here. And I'm just, it's just a thing that is fascinating.
It's a thing. Did you
It's a
stop?
thing.
Did you
No,
stop? Did you buy one?
I looked and I went past and thought, we have them here now. Welcome back to TRG 30 and thanks for being with us. Those that are new, really appreciate you making the time today to spend this 30 minutes with Caitlin and I. TRG 30 is about bold change for resilience, and so much of our sector's resiliency will rely on our organizations' abilities to build and maintain stunningly strong relationships with patrons, who are ticket buyers, bookers, members, donors, subscribers, however they might look or show up in your organizations. We're in the business together of managing those relationships, setting and hopefully exceeding expectations, stewarding investments, and authentically wooing folks with our values, communications, and of course, that all-important artistic product. So today, we're going to talk through some things that you're already likely doing, but we want to help you turn the dial up to make relatively routine communications do a little bit more heavy lifting to support the relationships that you're stewarding, rekindling and starting up sometimes right from afresh. We're certainly seeing in benchmark data right now that even right now, over the last 30 days, almost half of people booking are first timers on our databases. Kind of crazy, still attracting those new to file people through these challenging times. We're talking all about the communications you're sending after someone commits to buying a ticket, whether they're a first timer or a subscriber or a member. And we're going to take some time today to pause for a moment to check the tone of those invitations and the touch points in the journey along the way. So here's some things to listen out for. There's an opportunity right now to test and tweak and see how folks are responding and behaving to your communications. We want you to listen out for and think about the intentions that your communications have. How does every touch point, every opportunity to communicate and grow those relationships, support those and grow those relationships? And are there action points from today that you can take away and change easily, he says, and quickly? We will want you to listen out for that too. As always, there'll be a bit of time for questions and you can pop notes and respond in chat all the way through this time today. Caitlin, you're going to kick us off with posture and tone.
Yes, part one, posture and tone. So we've had conversations about this in this setting, probably together before, Stephen. So some of this may sound familiar to those of you who are regular tuner inners. But the posture and tone in your communications is absolutely critically important as you restart live performances or continue the performances that you're doing online or virtually. Now, it's important both for our new and for our lapsed or re-engaging audiences. But we're coming back to this today because we're all seeing, and I suspect you all have too, some things in our emails and inboxes and mailboxes that are missing the mark. I mean, we're seeing things on a pretty regular basis that are not setting organizations up for success. We're seeing brochures that are dark and depressing, full of policies and completely lacking humanity and life. Postcards that don't have any enthusiasm about returning to live performance, and emails and subscription letters that sound more like apologies than they do invitations. So we're taking this moment to recenter and refocus the tone and posture that we think all of your communications must have right now. Now, we know that the pandemic is very, very real still and absolutely still here. But your audience also already knows that. It's in the headlines of all of the news outlets that they are currently going to. It's in their inboxes. It is impacting their families and schools, businesses, travel. So our question to you is, do they need to hear about it from you? Now, we would say no, they don't. You can, in fact, show empathy without going to the deepest, darkest corners of that COVID pit, which is a deep, dark pit, folks, and it's an easy place for us to go. It's been hard for us in this industry. It's been hard for your teams, for your artists, especially as we're working through this. But that's not the role that we need to be playing with our audiences and our communities right now. So in fact, the role you can play is one of support in your community. You get to enthusiastically offer invitations for safe, comfortable, stunning performances online or in person that allow people to connect with each other again. So regardless of the content of your seasons, whether they're offering just boundless escapism this year or mirrors to reflect the current realities in your place, as a sector, arts and culture gets to tell a completely different story than the news outlets do. We have a different headline. We get to offer hope and connection and new paths forward. We get to inspire. So that is where we want to start our communications. And we have a very short checklist to support you in doing this. Number one, use photos of real humans whenever possible. We're in the business of human connection, so capitalize on that in all of your collateral, online and in print, and make sure your photos have life in them. It's hard sometimes, and there are still great pieces out there that don't have it. But try and bring life into your collateral from the images that you choose. Find something with passion. It doesn't all have to be sheer optimism, but find something that's really captivating and reminds us of the intensity and wonderful things that can happen in a live experience. Avoid the bleak isolation. I'm actually saying that because we've seen brochures that scream bleak isolation, and that is not what it's not what anybody needs in this particular time. Okay, number two, humanize your policy language. The first step in this is to ditch the word policy. Nobody needs to know what your policies are. That never has that been welcoming to anyone ever in anything you do. This isn't insurance. This is arts and culture. This is connection and art and people. So get rid of the word policy and find different language to be able to tell your patrons about your safety protocols. I just did that. I just switched policy for protocol. Protocol isn't better. Talk to people about how you're going to keep them comfortable in your space. Lean into empathetic lay language that will support the kinds of relationships you really want to build with your audience. And third, we have to invite people back with confidence, with true enthusiasm. So no apologies are necessary for inviting people back to a thing that they have loved before. No maybes, no mights, no tries, no plans, no hedging your bets. We're doing this. If something happens and things need to change, your people will understand. Things happen and need to change sometimes, but let's not communicate all the contingencies. Let's say we're doing this thing and we're going to do it and keep you comfortable here. Leading with doubt and uncertainty absolutely will not sell tickets. It never does. And right now we all need to be in the business of selling some more tickets. So let's sell with the things that help us do it. Enthusiasm, optimism, confidence. Announce proudly that you're back and we can't wait to see you. We have just a couple of examples here to get you thinking about this. I love the language that the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra is using. Now we celebrate. We can't wait to welcome you at long last. The return of live music awaits. See, this is still very empathetic. We can acknowledge what we've been through in the last 18 months without being in the pit. There's optimism, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Music is back here in Milwaukee. We have another example from Ballet West. Ballet West is back to live. This is their motto for the year. We are reminding people of life and vitality and aliveness and using that word in all the ways we can, boldly owning it with gorgeous photos of their dancers from the season. And finally, we'll head over to the UK where Octagon Theatre has some excellent language. On the front of their postcard, it says live theater is back, and it's back and affordable. So they've got all kinds of great sales messaging on this. And on the back side of it, they've got language that's really empathetic about safety. We're excited to welcome you back safely. We're doing everything we can to make you feel comfortable as you return to live events. Book with confidence. We have flexibility in our exchange policies. We're reduced seating and we've got limited capacity to do this. So none of this, all of this just feels welcoming and enthusiastic. So you've centered your campaigns in this enthusiasm. People will say yes. And then where do we go, Stephen?
Let's talk about the process that happens next, touch points after folks have accepted this generous invitation. They've said yes, they've paid or signed up for an engagement. What's next? Well, this is a chance to rebuild relationships with folks who were regulars in the past and to start new relationships with intention and focus. And that was important before the pandemic. It's certainly important through and will be after, right? This is also a time actually when you get to be really creative. You get to bring people in to the language and tone and culture of your organization. It's fun work, hard work, but fun for sure. Let's start off with those goals that we have for our communication cycle. Now, retention starts as soon as someone says yes and completes a transaction. We're going to look at that in 3 phases. First of all, pre-show. What happens before their experience, before they come through the doors, before they log on for an online performance, whatever that might be, what happens? How are we setting that up, that relationship up for success? Then on site, we've got this next moment when they are in a seat, or the performance has started or about to start, wherever that might be, however that might be happening. And then afterwards, what happens after that experience? How do we want people to think and feel and reflect on the experience that they've had, and also provide us with feedback potentially? So before the show, there's some things to think about here. There's a thank you. There's a thank you straight off the bat. How do we thank them? And if they're back, whether it be as a subscriber or someone that's having their first experience and visit post-COVID when we've reopened, how do we welcome them and acknowledge that relationship? How do we confirm that transaction? What does that look like? What information do we need to deliver? What do we need them to think about before they attend? And this comes back to this final point about what to expect. The experience of attending our venues might be different to what they may have experienced before. Or if they're a first timer, they don't have any preconceived ideas about entry, egress, what that experience will be like. And this values and organizational information here. This is a chance for you to, in those pre-show communications, start to set the tone of your purpose and mission. Why are you here? What impact are you having in the community? What things do you want to say before that visit? What about on-site? How are we welcoming folks? What's that first experience if we've got them queuing up and waiting outside potentially, if you've got COVID or vaccine checks to happen? What signage might be up there? How friendly is that signage? What tone and experience are you wanting to set out here? I actually have got an album on my phone of signage, unfriendly signage. I'm like, why have you put a sign up about this? Who are you trying to talk to with that sign? What feeling are you trying to evoke? What are you doing to tell the story of your venue, your organization in the lobby, especially if folks are waiting a little longer than usual to enter, if you have specific entry times, or if folks need to be in their seats early? What can you do to explain the experience or how you've continued to support your community over the last 18 months, the impact that you're having and have had and will continue to have? And proactive information about COVID safety, for sure, as Caitlin, your policies, processes, procedures, whatever words that you want to use. How can you proactively approach that? How can you make that a little bit more fun and a little less stressful and onerous, perhaps? We're seeing it everywhere we go, right? The same mask signs whenever we walk into places, the same expectations. How do we get ahead of that and make that feel a little bit differently? And then post-show, what do we want to say to folks after they've had their visit or experience? Thank you again, for sure. Are we surveying them? Are there specific questions that we want to ask? And is that about you, or is that about their experience? How can we serve you better? Might be a question that you ask. What's your intention with that survey? And how will you respond to and implement on the feedback that you're hearing from that survey opportunity? For first timers, is a survey an appropriate next ask for them? We've talked before on previous TRG 30s for sure to talk about the intention behind that. The goal is to get them back for a second visit. Do we want to ask them about their experience? Is that important? And what invitations are we putting in front of folks to have another experience? Right now, it will be more important than ever to get folks back for a second visit within the same season, to get them back into that habitual attendance, or hopefully habitual attendance for the future. Caitlin, what would you add here?
I don't know that I'd add anything. I mean, Stephen, you've covered it really well. I think the most important piece for anyone listening today is to just take a moment and pause and think through what your goals and intentions are for each of these three phases. We've given you some broad ideas of what they likely are, but your organizations have really bespoke, interesting relationships with your people. So you've got to figure out what exactly needs to happen in each of these phases to really steward the relationship. So there's a lot you can expand on here to absolutely customize this and make this yours. But the key takeaway is have some intention with each of these phases to be able to bring people along on a bit of a journey.
And I would also add in here, just from conversations I've actually had recently with clients, is how you're getting organizational alignment around these touch points. Do your ushers and box office teams know the communications that you're sending out to patrons? Are they saying the same thing with the same language and tone that your communications are? Because that can be different, right? We're welcoming you back, but actually we're going to be super strict on our policies, and we're going to ask you lots of questions as you walk through the door, and we're going to not know what's been sent to you in advance, or it might not be the same messaging, the same rules, however that might look, right? So be thoughtful about how that's shared internally too. So let's talk about those touch points, because an usher or box office person is certainly a touch point. At each phase, you have resources and channels, whether it be people, whether it be email, whether it be signage at the ready to support those intentions. So here's how that might look. Think about your customer journey and experience. Might you need to send, for example, your pre-show information earlier than you're used to? Is the day before, the day of, right, if there's more information that needs to be digested or more preparation that patron might need to take? If you've got links within that, are they the same links that you had prior to COVID? Might you need to guide folks to a different place on your website? How clear and easy is that information to digest about the pre-show experience? How are you setting people up for success? And what might have changed actually since those folks booked tickets? Have any of your policies or procedures or processes changed about their experience that you might need to make those folks aware of? And how do you acknowledge those, knowing that we continue to be in uncertain times? So there's email confirmation, there's that confirmation that happens when they book. There's the pre-show information that can happen just before or in the week of their attendance. And then what even now might you introduce on the day, reminding them if they're unable to attend, for example, what your exchange or refund or credit processes might be. Let's take all of the stress out of that experience before they walk through the door. And then next on site, I've talked about signage, right? But really, really walk through your venue as a patron. Is your signage clear? Is it welcoming? And do you actually need to have those signs up? Actually, sometimes it might just be better to take them down, particularly if you've got folks welcoming and emphasizing that information. Obviously, be thoughtful about accessibility in that process so everybody can digest your information, but the right information and the welcoming information. Your programs, how do folks access that? If it is virtual only, how will you facilitate with that for folks that might not have a device that can download it and might want some information about the show? And your people, I touched on this on the previous slide, right? But how are we preparing our front of house and box office teams and ushers to have the right dialogue and conversation and the right approach? How are they modeling your values and your culture and showing up really, really well in those situations? I've heard about preparing for conflict, but actually, how do we prepare for a really, really great experience in the training and conversations that we're having with our teams right now? And listening for what they're hearing. What are they hearing from patrons as you go into live performances again? Are there particular questions that are coming up consistently that can help you adjust your pre-show messaging? Is there pushback or lack of clarity around some of that messaging that you can help? How are you listening and gaining feedback from those folks too?
Stephen, I have a client. I'm sharing this because it was such a great story. First performance back in 18 months or maybe a little bit longer. And their house manager was making the announcement for everyone that the theater was open and it was time for them to take their seats. And they brought with them the energy and enthusiasm that the organization's marketing had projected into this in all of the materials leading up to it. And everyone in the lobby erupted in cheers and applause before they ever even got into the theater, because that emotion was so visceral, and they created this really lovely moment there. Your people, and having your people who are there on the ground, on site with your audiences, can create these really important moments for someone's understanding of your organization and how that works. So maybe all get rounds of applause when you chime the bell for everyone in their seats.
And we've got to lean in on those folks hard right now, because there are some tough and challenging conversations that are sometimes happening, I know. We've got to make sure that they've got that energy and support that they need to have that type of approach with patrons, right? I know that that's difficult and some of those conversations are tough, but hopefully they can join in and celebrate the experience of the return to live. Let's talk about post-show. You've got an opportunity to send an email to them immediately after the show. What will you want to talk about, convey, ask for feedback on in that email? Is there a further reminder that reinforces that message with an invitation or even an offer? Now, not every post-show email needs an offer, but offers can be really, really valuable, particularly for new to file audiences. And if you've got enough time and events left in your season, to incentivize multi-buying too. But these post-show emails can also be a specific invitation to the next something, whether it be another performance, town hall, or online discussion about what they may have just seen, or even some form of party to celebrate the show. Whatever you decide, be clear, warm, and tailor that message to your audience and keep it really, really focused. What next step, go back to that intention, what next action or activity would you like this patron to take? And keep your message really, really focused there. Now, typically, a lot of these communications that we see are only dealt with via email, but we really, really recommend including direct mail absolutely in your post-event communications. Yes, it's additional budget expense, but direct mail, if you've read Jill's blog and saw her previous TRG30, you'll know there's data here to support this. Direct mail is increasing in response rates all over. And so your ability to share and reinforce that email follow-up with a postcard or a reminder, something that, and I'll show you some examples in a second, that really, really reflects the experience that they'd have, we'd really recommend. And maybe even a phone call, particularly for your most valuable patrons, right? Or those that you may have heard in post-show surveys, feedback that you might need to address with a further conversation. Let's look at some examples then from Shakespeare Theatre Company in DC First, a lovely personalized response with every subscriber immediately after their purchase, and also a welcome drink. So this is right at the tip top pre-show. This goes out, lands in mailboxes just days after. And what I love about this is we're starting to evoke the emotion and the experience that they're going to have in venue with that photo on the front of the postcard. As Caitlin said, put people at the very front and center of your communications right now, before and after, actually. A great example here from Grant Park in Chicago, a lovely follow-up from the summer season. This was actually to new to file patrons, personalized from the box office manager that was talking again about future performances and inviting them back. This focus and attention through the summer meant that their same season festival new to file retention rose to 9% from their prior average of 4%, which is a real feat, actually. I think their season was shortened to 7 weeks compared to the normal 10. So they were able to get those folks back and increase retention just from that personalized and focused response. Some website copy here from Pittsburgh Playhouse, really patron focused. Yes, it's about COVID for sure, but this references actual feedback that they've garnered from their patrons who have shared how they would like their experience to be, and they've reflected that in their communications. We've listened to you, and here's how your experience is going to be based on the feedback that you've given us. And finally, an example of a customized invitation to return. This one's from the Omaha Community Playhouse. This is very, very specific. We loved having you for a Raisin in the Sun. How about another experience? And we're going to offer you a discount if you book again. A few things to note on here. Again, faces on the front of the postcard for sure. A time-limited incentive that reinforces, I'm sure they followed this up in email communications too, that gets and encourages patrons to come back for another visit. Okay, next steps, and we're going to get to your questions. Review your post-purchase touch points. Do you have enough? Is it multi-channel? And is the information clear, crystal clear? What do you need people to hear, see, and feel from those touch points? Test it with a colleague, see what's missing. Craft it with absolute intention. What do you need them to take from that piece of communication? Gut check your tone. Remember, we're talking to people who are hearing about COVID policies all the time, wherever they go. How can you show up differently and uniquely in the way that your organization does every single day? And we're going to need to adapt as we continue to go through. The next few months remain a little bit uncertain, right? But adapt that cycle. What feedback are you hearing from your people front of house, from feedback from your surveys? How can you adapt those messages and from the responses that you're receiving and garnering as you step through those communications? Okay, we're going to go to questions now. Caitlin, let's have a look. We've got one from Stephanie, who's asked for some advice. We've talked about ushers, how to engage ushers who are largely volunteers and often work infrequently with little to no training in this work.
Yeah, well, I mean, Stephanie, I think you might have answered it in your question. They often have little or no training. I think we've got to invest in bringing people along with us. So maybe that means you have monthly training sessions for ushers, 30 minutes before the show or an hour before curtains, so that you can start to, in all good ways, inculcate them into the energy and tone and culture of your organization. These volunteers are absolutely critical parts of our team, and we've got to invest in them in other ways. Getting a free ticket to the show isn't enough. Thanking them isn't enough. Let's invest in them by really bringing them into our family and strategy, and you'll see a profound impact there. I'm just certain of it.
There's a couple of things I'd add.
That's a good question.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd add in terms of, particularly for volunteers. Can we invite them into the venue earlier and have a nightly huddle or briefing that perhaps is a little bit longer than what we're used to, that starts to engage them in that conversation further? But also here, I'd recommend thinking about how you can garner feedback from them too, post visit, as it were, as post volunteer shift. You know, is there a simple question that you can say, give me your feedback? What were you hearing from patrons? What else do you think we could do to improve the patron experience? They will tell you. They're right on the front line. That can help them feel more engaged and that they're being listened to as part of the process. Caitlin, I knew this question would come up. You've set yourself up here, right? What do you suggest as an alternative to policies? And I'm just thinking in the moment about whether I've seen some examples of this. And one that's come immediately to mind is your experience, actually not even referencing COVID. Your experience, your visit, what to expect, that doesn't even
I like that.
talk about those words, right?
Yeah, how we're keeping safe, how we'll keep you comfortable in the theater, what to expect. I think I would steer as far clear. I did it very poorly today. You all will do it much better. I would steer far clear of protocol, policy, procedure in any of this. Let's make this about a human experience. So yeah, Stephen, I think you're right. I love experience. I've not heard that before, and I think that works really well.
We've got about a minute left. Grant's popped something in chat. Yes, you'll get a copy of this tomorrow. I want to answer this one really quickly about people that won't read information. And about 3/4 of patrons actually don't read the emails that we send to them, right? Even if they open it, there's a lot of information to digest. Something really simple here might be at entry is to check, are you aware of all of the processes we have in place, the experience that you're about to have? Is there anything that I can fill you in on? Small reinforcement of the key points that they need to know and hear. Or it might even be handing out a postcard that gives them information, for example, upon arrival. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd add there, Caitlin, that you've seen or heard.
No, yes, we could, but yes, what you've just said is absolutely right. We've got to get multiple touch points in. It's why I think you need to look at the expanse of touch points and looking at multiple channels to just try and get those numbers up a little bit. We'll never get to 100%, but let's get beyond 20% or 25% that you might have now.
And I think prepare your front of house folks for the fact that some folks will not have digested any of it. That can come across, right, as in the moment impatience when we're having to repeat the same things over again. Let's prepare in our briefings. Many folks, we've sent all of this out, but many of them won't digested it. How are we going to show up in that situation? Hey, we've got other questions, and Caitlin, I think we'll think about how we can incorporate those perhaps into our post communications ourselves today.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Jill will be back in 2 weeks with Michael Mattis, who's going to return to talk more about resiliency. But we really thank you for your time with us today. May the force be with you. We're always here to help you if you need us. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.